Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, where sometimes we feel like prose and sometimes we feel like cons. With me today, I have the wonderful and magnanimous Paddy Boylan.
Am I magnanimous?
You're magnanimous. I think you're magnanimous.
Okay. It's just of all the things you could have said, magnanimous.
There's a magnanimosity to you.
I'll take it. Hi, I'm Paddy Boylan. I am an editor, technical writer, and creative writing teacher. That's kind of writing a novel, kind of, sort of. Kind of.
And the ever-charming and effervescent James Healy.
I don't know what effervescent means to agree or disagree with that, but I will certainly take it. Hello, I'm James Healy. I'm a writer and editor. Short and sweet.
Yeah, nice. And my name is Alex. I am a writer. I have written a series of short stories called Golden Hour that you can find on Amazon. I've also contributed to the New Mythic collection of short stories. I've written some novels as well, but none of them are out yet because I am terrified to edit and release them. And then just recently, I contributed a short story to the Big Issues fiction edition, which I was very proud of. And that's actually leading into our comment today. But before we get to that, I would like to ask you guys, what have you been reading? What have you been consuming? What has been consuming your brain space in terms of, media?
The author who's been consuming my brain is Bernard Cornwell. Cornwell, not a wall of corn, a well full of corn. I mentioned before, historical fiction, really, 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 really good. It's like Iron Age Britain. The TV series The Last Kingdom was based on it. Haven't seen the TV series. Here it's good. Here it's okay. Okay.
Yes, I like it.
I started on book 8, as it turns out, because my dad just randomly gave me book 8. And now I've gone back to book 3 because I couldn't find the first 2.
Wow, okay.
It's not the sort of thing where you need to
jump.
read it in order. But that's good. I haven't devoured a book this quickly in a long time. Yeah, Bernard Cornwell, Last Kingdom series. Read it if you like that.
Now I can't stop thinking about a well of corn. Just full to the brim. You'd take some out and it just it's right back there the next day.
Do they fill it up every day?
I don't know.
How does it work?
Well of corn. And what about you, James? What have you been reading, listening to, consuming?
I've been reading Dracula by Bram Stoker.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Really enjoying that. Yeah. Lovely little, I love how it's laid out. You've got all these little moments, all these little kind of brief horror stories that are kind of going on. Very enjoyable read. And I love reading stuff that is, I guess, when it's structured in such a way that you can break it up into all the different little horror stories, if you know what I mean. I think that's a really good way of telling a horror story. So really enjoying that.
Yeah. I will go on record, and I'm sure I have before, as saying that the first section of that novel, the epistolary diary entry section, is one of my favorite, I'm going to say, short stories of all time. It is technically part of the novel, but it's so self-contained and so chilling. It's just right up there with my favorite horror stuff, which, considering how much horror I read, I think is high praise.
I think I might be the only one of us aggregate 6 that hasn't read Dracula yet. I should really get on that. Everyone says it's great.
Yeah, it's really good.
It's a good book. It's a good book. And myself, I usually feel guilty about just saying, I've been playing a video game, but I've been playing Bloodborne, and honest to God, that is just such a masterclass in environmental and indirect storytelling. It is I think I could probably say it is my favorite game of all time. It's just so compelling. If you like big, spooky, deity is kind of manipulating the story in ways that aren't immediately foreseeable, despite the fact that you're actually in it, driving the action forward, and you still feel like you're not even really part of the plot, or this very small part of the plot. It's just, I can't even really describe it. It's, if you at all into Dark Souls stuff or horror or any intersection of those two medias, you got to do yourself a favor and play this game because it's so good. Paddy, I realize you can't do that because it hasn't been released for PC yet, but
I know.
One day. Anyway, so yes, on a different topic, today we're going to be talking about comedic writing, and I'll start out with a little bit of just how I came to just wanted to do this topic. As I've said on here before, I often get told people think my writing's kind of funny, which is good. I appreciate
is.
that. Thank
It
you.
is funny. You're a funny writer.
I thank you. I appreciate that. It's something that sort of comes to me naturally. I think I've always just written that way, which can be kind of tricky when you're writing horror because that's a really fine line to walk. Anyway, I wanted to kind of, and recently, a friend of mine, Nate, who's actually the husband of Ali, who's also on this podcast, he reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I need this little script thing here. Like, it's this." And I'm going to give you the brief of it, and I will read out this script because it's quite short. But first, I want to just give you the brief of kind of how this went. Okay, so he said, and this was a prompt that he wrote for ChatGPT, and ChatGPT wrote in a thing, and it apparently didn't work out. So write me a short scene in the style of Ted Lasso. It should be about a young male teacher from Texas waiting to be interviewed at an Australian primary school. His manner is jovial, friendly, and warm, while his jokes may not land as well. He should be conducting his interview with the principal and discussing his qualifications. His responses are flippant and yet convey a loving tone for what he does as a teacher. The principal is not hard, but she does carry an air of doubt as to his place in the school. The scene should end with a smile. So
Okay.
I think you guys will agree, based on that writ, that sounds like a fairly comical tone, right? That sounds like something that's inherently kind of funny, right?
I think so. The jokes aren't landing, but we're laughing that they're not landing.
Yeah, we're laughing not at the jokes, but at his attempt to tell the jokes, which is almost like a meta.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to read this out just yet. What I am going to read is an older piece of literature by P.G. Wodehouse. You guys may not have read it, but you'll certainly be familiar with the guy himself. His
I
Jeeves,
love Wodehouse.
the Jeeves series. Yeah, great.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I've
Okay,
never heard of
cool.
Wodehouse in my life, but please continue.
No, you'll know. You know
Okay.
Jeeves the butler. Like you've probably heard that name. Like
Yeah, I
oh,
do. I
Jeeves,
didn't
yeah.
actually. I thought it was just a random
Yeah.
stereotype. I didn't know that it was a real character.
Well, this is where it comes from. Yeah,
Oh.
he's this old, this wise kind of like almost godlike figure who's just like,
Oh.
who's
That's why we ask him.
Yeah, exactly. That's why there's exactly ask Jeeves. That's where that comes from. It's a whole thing. Anyway, this is actually not directly related to the Butler, but I thought was a very good example of comedy for a couple of reasons we're going to talk about in a second. But we'll get to here. I know I'm nesting things within things.
No,
but
this is
it's
good.
all coming to a head. Now, this is in the audiobook version I'm listening to. This is read by Stephen Fry. So I'm not going to do quite the justice it is, but I'll try and put a bit of Fry into it. The shades of evening were beginning to fall pretty freely by now, but the visibility was still good enough to enable me to observe that up the road there was approaching a large, stout, moon-faced policeman on a bicycle. And he was, one could see, at peace with all the world. His daily round of tasks may or may not have been completed, but he was obviously off duty for the moment, and his whole attitude was that of a policeman with nothing on his mind but his helmet. Well, when I tell you that he was riding without his hands, you will gather to what lengths the careless gaiety of this serene slop had spread. And where the drama came in was that it was patent that his attention had not yet been drawn to the fact that he was being chivied in the strong, silent, earnest manner characteristic of this breed of animal by a fine Aberdeen terrier. There he was, riding comfortably along, sniffing the fragrant evening breeze, and there was the Scotty, all whiskers and eyebrows, herring after him, hell for leather. As Jeeves said later, when I described the scene to him, the whole situation resembled some great moment in a Greek tragedy where somebody is, this is excised for some reason, is something wide and handsome, quite unconscious that all the while Nemesis is at his heels. And he may be right. The constable, I dare say, was riding without his hands, and but for this disaster, when it occurred, might not have been so complete. I was a bit of a cyclist myself in my youth. I think I've mentioned that I once won a choir boy's handicap at some village sports, and I can testify that when you are riding without your hands, privacy and a complete freedom from interruption are of the essence. The merest suggestion of an unexpected Scotty connecting with the ankle bone at such a time, and you swoop into a sudden swerve. And as everybody knows, if the hands are not firmly on the handlebars, a sudden swerve spells a smeller. And so it happened now. A smeller, and among the finest I have ever been privileged to witness, was what this officer of the law came. One moment he was with us, all merry and bright, the next he was in the ditch. A sort of McDoin of, I don't know what that word means, of arms and legs and wheels, with a terrier standing on the edge looking down at him with that rather offensive expression of virtuous smugness which I've often noticed on the faces of Aberdeen terriers in their clashes with humanity. I just think that is so funny. There's like,
That's very charming.
Just the, it's just, yeah, it's so charming is the word. It's so charmingly like gay is the word I want to say.
That's exactly, you know what? That's the word I was thinking.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like,
not in the sense of being homosexual, but being like gay and free. And it's just so like, oh, when I saw this policeman come a cropper, and what a scene it was. And his whole writing style is like that.
Yes.
But there's also this other layer like of him like bringing a sense of like nemesis and Greek tragedy. It's operating on a lot of levels. So I wanted to talk about that. And I wanted to talk about in that scene specifically, and we'll talk about others. What is it that makes that charming and amusing at the very least, even if it's not necessarily laugh out loud funny? Parts of it I think are, but what is it that brings the humor to that? What do you think?
It's definitely his own delight in what happened. That in itself is funny. The fact that he found it so amusing. And I guess the way he's telling the story is reflecting that, which is sort of making you like in on the gag as well, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. It's like when someone's telling a joke and you can tell that they find it really funny. Sometimes it can make that funnier.
Yeah.
And you can kind of almost hear the author laughing along with it.
Yeah, because there's definitely a way to tell that scene where it's, if not tragic, at least like, you know, you kind of
absolutely,
you know,
yeah. I think also it's the fact that there is an accident, and like everybody knows that the difference between like a funny accident and an awful accident is like the extent of the injury. But his whole tone is so light that you know nothing serious came of it. We can assume, unless this man's a sociopath, that the police officer wasn't badly injured, that it's just a what a scrap.
Okay, that I'll start jumping into the specifics of what we're going to look at here. I think so. One of the things about comedy is finding the funny in the everyday, noticing the everyday, and there's like the sense of, I mean, we don't so much have bobbies riding down the street on a police dog these days, but we're all familiar with the idea of a small dog chasing after something, and of someone being like free and easy and unconcerned and just at peace with the world. So the idea of it just being this everyday thing, but then the absurdity of this being a policeman that's like riding with no handlebars, and also that, like, have you guys ever ridden a bike with no handlebars or like seen someone do it?
No.
Okay,
I haven't, but
I've
seen people do it.
And he describes it pretty well. Like if you're going with no handlebars, it's pretty chill. Like you're just like, oh yeah, I'm just doing this. Look at this fun
people
thing.
glide. They glide along the road. Yeah.
But if something comes across your path, you're like well and truly munted. Like there's no coming back. Like you got to do one of these and you're going to come off. So there's something of the everyday to that in comedy that I think is fun. Can you guys think of, or in the examples you have, do you have a sense of like the everyday, the mundanity of it kind of coming and making it funny? Like,
yes, like every Monty Python's Flying Circus sketch ever.
Yeah.
I mean, even the whole thing with a Bobby riding a police officer comes up a lot. Yeah. It's always like old ladies inevitably played by men, or like the vicar comes to tea.
Yes.
Like very, again, like Middle England as well, like mundane, everyday, completely average events. But, you know, then someone explodes or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
They do that all the time.
It really pushes that absurd. It makes me think, I just saw A Fish Called Wanda, which was produced, I think it's definitely Michael Palin and also John Cleese. John Cleese, right? So they're in it. They're both in it, and there's very much that sense of that movie plays with a lot of the sense of like an American coming and seeing all the foibles of the British and being very like the British being all stuck up and like very stiff and that sort of thing. So they're playing it like it's kind of the juxtaposition of those two cultures. Like there's this one guy that the main guy's name's Otto, and he's a real jerk, and the person Michael Palin is playing is this guy with a stutter. He's a really bad stutter, right? And like the whole time it's and it's very easy now. It's a little it's it's a little off.
A little offensive.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
if you've got a stutter, it's kind of a jerk thing to make fun of. But
Yes.
the way it's done, like the over the topness of the way this guy sociopathically makes fun of you, like he just very clearly comes off as a terrible person, and this guy who's stuttering is just like just trying to get through it, and the juxtaposition between that is just very, very funny. Yeah, so that's sort of a one little part of it, the everyday. Can you think of an element of that, James, that sort of comes through there? Like
I'm trying to think. There is something about honing in on just particular everyday
Little
moments that
details.
always feels funny. Anytime that I've tried to do that in my own writing, no matter what the context or what the tone of the story is, if you elongate a specific moment, I guess if you just keep looking for details to talk about, something about it starts to feel very comedic. It's like the character is neurotically honing in on one thing, or you're putting it under such a microscope that it starts to become absurd.
Yes. Yeah, that's
yeah.
I don't know why that is, but you're right. Like sometimes over-examining something does get to the point where it's funny. It's really hard. Like so much of this stuff, it's really hard to put your finger on why something is funny.
Yeah,
but it definitely is.
You could definitely detail, like there's tons of details you could focus on with the officer there in that scene. I think
And
it's
he
the
does,
fact that
yeah.
he's focused on the helmet. It's the specific things that he has focused on is what kind of makes it funny. Putting together the story that all of these details go into the fall.
There's also the playing with expectations. This is like
Yes.
the everyday thing, but when someone's riding on handlebars, riding a bike without using handlebars, and it's a joke, you know what's going to happen, and the expectation of that is funny. And everyone has seen like a small terrier that's unreasonably aggressive for its size, and that's funny. So maybe it's also just drawing on these everyday things that we see and note and smile at, and he tells them again, and so we smile at them again and bring back past memories.
Yeah. I think there's really something to be said for the like little details thing in it. So in the story I mentioned at the beginning, pool etiquette that I submitted for the big issue, that's really about like the focus of that is like a so it comes from like I do a lot of swimming. I've actually literally just come back from the pool, and there's this weird thing where in the pool, at least with me, like you've got different lanes, right? So you have a slow lane, a fast lane, and a and like a medium lane, right? And if you're in the fast lane, for me, it's like I get real annoyed if like there's a slow swimmer in the it's this really, really petty thing where it's like I'm in this lane and I'm going fast, so you should go fast. And it's very silly and very like, I have really no reason to stand on that soapbox. But
it has struck me that the main character in these series does tap into your own neuroses somewhat.
without a doubt.
It's very effective. Like this comes from the point of view of someone who has felt these things before. Yeah.
I am a very neurotic person. Like ask my girlfriend. I'm very neurotic.
That's how the character works. It feels really real. Anyway.
I think that's it. That's part of it. It taps into some element of like, no, I know what this feeling is. I'm this is coming from a very real place. So yeah, that story is basically about this guy who gets into a pool and he's really set on what he wants to do, and he's going to swim his laps because that's what he has to do. He has to do a set number of laps, and these kids start jumping into the pool from this rock. And at first he's like, well, that's really annoying because I'm doing this thing, and but he's like, fine, whatever, they're doing that, they're not going to bother me, it's over here, I'll just do my thing. But the kids, as the story goes on, get further and further, like closer and closer. And the humor in it, I think, there's a little bit of a resolution at the end, which I think is actually quite kind of nice. But the humor in it, the really funny thing about it, I think, is that observing the tension of these kids pushing it and pushing it and seeing the effect it has on this guy's psyche, and like seeing him get upset about something, but realizing like it's not really worth getting upset about.
Yeah,
trying to like talk to someone about like these kids, and then
the stakes are so low,
fine.
but the frustration's so high.
That's right, and it's just about that sort of juxtaposition there. So, and then at the end, there's a bit of a fill up and a turnaround with expectations.
People's getting really frustrated in the situation is such a cornerstone of comedy. I mean, it feels so awful when it's us, but when we can see it in other people, it's so inherently absurd because so often it just seems like nothing.
That's it.
And I guess we like to laugh at people's pain.
Well, that was the next point I wanted to get into. That things
Okay.
that irritation, frustration, and humiliation are these really funny things as long as they're happening to someone else, right?
Mm.
There's this voyeuristic sense of like, well, better you than I, that is very, very amusing. It's why but then also being able to relate to it is funny as well. It's like the Chinese restaurant episode in Seinfeld, really all of Seinfeld, but where they're just waiting at this Chinese restaurant, and it's like, well, you're waiting, you got to wait. But the episode happens in real time, and they're going through this thing, being sort of like, when are we going to get served? And someone else comes in and they're like, but him, and they're like, oh no, they had a reservation, and there's this tangible sense of like, you don't really have a leg to stand on, and yet, So there's this combination of empathy, but also like recognition that it's a bit absurd to be so upset about this.
I'm saying, incidentally, that is my least favorite episode of Seinfeld, like by
Really?
far. But
Really?
it has like all of the beats of funny.
Yeah,
It's almost
okay.
like a lesson on how to be funny. Yeah, I think it's really lame. But
I
it's
really
definitely
like
got
it.
like, okay, well,
But it's yeah, like you said, it's kind of a masterclass in how to do it. Like
it's got the components, yeah.
yeah, it's the soup, without maybe the. Well, no, I like it. I'll stand on that. I think it's a fun.
Okay,
piece.
you
But
can.
what do we think of that? Like, what's an example or element of someone else, someone else's frustration being amusing to us, the audience?
Yeah, I guess if the frustration or if even the panic or something just far exceeds the situation, or if it's just if it's not resulting in any progress being made at all, that can be very funny. I don't know if either of you have watched the British TV show Peep Show.
Yes, love Peep Show.
I think I have. It's really surreal, isn't it?
No,
It's kind of from their point of view sometimes. They had cameras on the actor's head.
That's so funny that like I'm gonna do this now.
Yeah, some of it's very awkward and cringy. But there's an episode where they get locked in a hallway as they're leaving someone's apartment, and I think it's on the day of his like son's christening or something. So he like really, really needs to be there. And the pair of them are just stuck in the apartment. They can't get out the front door. They can't go back into the room, and he's really freaking out. And because he's freaking out, the other guy is sort of just relaxing, and he's trying to order pizza to the door to get it. But he's like, "Why aren't you giving this more? Why aren't you getting more aggravated?" And he's like, "It's not going to do anything." So it's the fact that one of them is so like I guess he should be panicking, but his panic is just doing nothing. He's just flapping his wings. That's so funny. And then you contrast it against the other guy who's almost like finding somewhere comfortable to sit down and wait until they're discovered. It's very, very funny.
And that's like the dynamic of that show is part of what makes it so funny, because one guy is this really neurotic, like, oh, I can't even talk to people, I hate this, and the other guy is just this totally off the wall, like, yeah, man, whatever, like he's just so and they're both kind of like objectively terrible people. Incidentally, Paddy, this is the same person who does Succession. Is kind of the main writer of this, I believe. So it's
I didn't know that. Okay,
it is, yeah, which you'd never know until you see it, and then you're like, got it. So
right,
yeah, it's these like functionally and pretty much everyone on the show is really terrible. But it's these guys just going through their life, just trying to make it through these situations, and just progressively making them worse. It's just really, really funny. Like it might be one of my favorite, just like straight up sitcoms. I think
I don't know anyone who doesn't like it. It's a good show.
It's kind of what I describe as cringe porn. That's what but it's an example of that done really, really well.
Like all of Arrested Development is incredible. No, not Arrested Development.
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Not bad. Yeah. How did you know?
Because
it's the
it is.
thing.
That's just what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My mother can't watch it because she said it's just awful. Like I can't do this. The situations are so excruciating. Larry David is such an idiot. Like, no, stop doing that, David. No. And he just makes it worse and worse because he's so incredibly, again, neurotic.
Yeah, it's something really funny is actually that in real life, apparently Larry David went on not Jay Leno, I don't know, Kimmel or something, beat up Elmo, who was on there, and people like, You can't do that. Elmo is like an 8-year-old child. That's what he's meant to represent. And like Larry David was doing it, but it's like I haven't seen.
But that's Larry David. Like, but of
I
course he
know.
would, because like that's what he does. His whole comedy is doing the thing that's really inappropriate that makes you like horrified that he's doing it.
Yeah, and that's why Curb Your Enthusiasm works so well, because again, like we were saying, it's this extrapolation of his character, and the realness of that is what's so engaging about it. Do you know what I mean?
And it also, like going back to the whole thing of like stretching out scenes far too long. Often those scenes go far further than they probably should, and they come back around again to being even funnier than they
could. This is something I want to talk about too. That this is what I call the dip, right? Where, and I think it works particularly well in what I'm going to continue to call cringe porn. But
that's a good name.
I think so. It's like you watch something and it's funny, and then suddenly it's not funny anymore, and you watch it and you're like, oh, this is uncomfortable, and you keep watching, it keeps getting more uncomfortable, and then suddenly it gets funny again for some reason. It's like it takes this very specific comedic ballsiness to like push through that to get through to the other side. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Auntie Donna. Auntie Donna's Great Big House of Fun. It's on Netflix, but basically it's a sketch show. Like, okay, and there's this I'll give you an example. One sketch, the very first sketch in the first episode. They're kind of like, everything's a drum, and they're like just singing this song about everything being a drum, and they're hitting on things, that they're hitting like items, hitting things, and it just at some point, like he hits something and it stops making like the drum sound, and the music stops, and then he goes like, he turns, I forget their names, but one guy's like, Darren, you promised me that everything would be a drum. And then the other guy's like, I don't know what happened. And one guy like comes up and just comes like, you promised me. And it just like, it becomes really, really intense and like a bit uncomfortable. And then it gets back into it. Everything's like, it's just this classic tension and release thing. That's just, it's very funny. I'm not describing it very well, but
no.
It pushes through, and their whole thing is that it pushes through that sense of like, oh, I don't like this, until it becomes more like funny again.
Well, I don't know if this is a good time for it, but at some point, I've got a few notes here on how I did a little bit of research, because I love research on the comedy, how comedy works, and the idea of establishing a pattern, but then subverting the pattern, and it's the subversion that's often funny.
Yes.
Like the whole 3 men walk into a bar thing, the setup is often man 1 does a thing, man 2 does a thing, man 3 almost does a thing, doesn't do the thing. And that's funny. And maybe the whole drawing it out too long is we establish a pattern, but then it's like, oh, this is no good. But then we realize that the new pattern is the fact that it is too long.
Don't
know if I'm articulating.
No, I think that's exactly right. It's like it's like re-establishing an order of out of disorder. You know,
and when you realize the new order is, oh wait, okay, this is inappropriately long.
That's
when
like
you start.
It's almost like the sense that the people making it didn't get what they were doing, and that's uncomfortable for us because you get this secondhand uncomfortable. But then when you realize they're in on that joke, then you suddenly become in on the meta joke.
When you realize the acting forgetting their lines is actually part of the play.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. That's a really good analogy, actually. And you took me to the next little bit, which is the zig zag, right? So you've got bit 1, reinforcement, and then the third thing is the punchline. So that's why we like Cards Against Humanity, right? So you know, you have, am I thinking about cards? Yeah. So like, there's one thing, something else, and then a third thing, you know, kind of brings it all together. Another element of it, the fact that humor is subjective. So not everyone is going to find every kind of humor funny, which is in a sense what makes it funny, because you know, like if you're a right-wing satirist, you know, like if you're making fun of right-wing politicians, you're essentially cutting off a whole audience of people who are going to be into that. So it's like the being part of the in-group is kind of what makes something funny in the sense of parody. If you're parodying like Donald Trump or something.
The example I have, again, Monty Python, is The Life of Brian. When I saw it as a kid, I mean, I got 25% of it. As an adult, the fact that the jokes are so hyper specific to ancient Roman / Jesus / Judean history It's like, who would make this? It's just so dumb. It's the hyper specificity that makes it funny, and the fact that you're
The
laughing
details.
about like the Judean People's Front. It's simultaneously laughing about Roman occupation and also the inanity of, you know, like resistance movements that have infinite meetings and never actually take action because they need to like have a subcommittee on voting for everything.
Yeah, like just any sort of humor is inherently going to be it's going to be specific. It's going to be targeted to something. And it kind of goes back to the details thing, you know, like if you're hyperfixating on something, just the very targetedness of it and the fact that like one person in the room is going to be like, yeah, I get that. I like Hawaiian pizza. Like is going to make it funny, you know? Like there's an element of like, oh, I'm the in group. I get what that's about. And because it's so targeted, it's more potent.
Yeah, definitely with cringe comedy and stuff, there are people who just have no tolerance for that. They can't watch it at all. And it is something which, on the one hand, it's targeting an audience in terms of these are the people who find it funny, and the other hand, it's kind of laughing at this person because this is the person's gotten themselves into this situation, and they don't know how to get themselves out of it. And some people, I think some people can be quite uncomfortable with laughing at a person because they want to sympathize with the character.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. I've seen plenty of comedies where a lot of people think it's funny. I'm just like, oh, why are we laughing at this person, this poor unfortunate individual? Like, not that I'm any better. I'll definitely laugh at some things, but just some situations, like everyone, won't do it for me.
I know a lot of people really struggled with It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia because I think at the beginning of the show, when you start watching it, you're trying to find a character who you're meant to be identifying with and meant to be rooting for, and that character doesn't come along because they're all terrible people. So I think a lot of people don't know where to put their focus, and then because each of the characters keeps failing and doing horrible things, I think people found it a little bit like not quite sure. I was one of those people. I was kind of like, I don't know who's the main character, who's the character I meant to like. And that never comes along.
Well,
so you have to get
It's interesting because the first series of that, they are actually like, before they sort of found their niche, there are kind of like, they're following like social themes, and you can see them actually kind of trying to do good in the community. Like it's very misguided and doesn't, but there is this weird sort of messaging going through, like trying to be like, oh no, actually, you know, we should, I can't think of a specific thing.
But it's like their heart's in the right place. But
they're
just
like
keep fucking it up because
they're trying to stop kids getting on drugs or something like that in this very horribly misguided way. But as it goes on, they stop doing that, and they just become, and the meta commentary of the show is actually these people becoming worse and worse and more terrible people, so much to the point where the actor who did Matt he's like, I got sick of seeing people like get more attractive as like the show got more popular because they got more money and they could afford surgery and stuff. So I wanted to do a thing where I just got really fat over like a series of seasons, and I'm just like walking around like that. So he just did that as a bit. And it's
just
kind
put on tons of weight for
yeah. As like a commentary on like, no, sometimes it's not about people being happy and getting better. Sometimes it's about, you know, shit being real, which I think was very funny.
Yeah. So because we're a class act and we always have fine, reputable sources, I was on the Explain Like I'm 5 subreddit for researching this episode. And because we always credit our sources, Reddit user Funky One, thank you, Reddit user Funky One, actually had some very good insight to the question, why do we find stuff funny? Which is really, like, there's a lot of answers, and it turns out that the answer is really complicated. No one really knows, but there's a lot of factors that go into it. And they said that they heard a theory. All right, so this is third-hand information. I'm telling you about something that a Reddit user heard. So a lot of humor is subversion of patterns, right? I think we've kind of talked about this. You know, you set up the A, you set up the B, and then the C is kind of weird. And obviously that's one, and there's many types of humor. And they heard about a theory for why that might be. And they talked about, because it's just a theory, but we might have evolved humor as a sort of quote, or paraphrase, cognitive reward for recognizing potentially dangerous, faulty patterns in a safe context before the potential error could cause harm. So, for example, let's say there's someone and they're dancing around a fire with the rest of the tribal people, and they kind of catch fire a little bit. And they're fine. You put them out, but the fact that it was nearly a catastrophe, everybody laughs about it, no harm done. But everyone remembers the moment because it's, really funny.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a bonding thing. And then we come together over, but don't dance too close to the fire like Og, because Og is an idiot.
That silly guy.
Continue, I know, Og. We laugh about him to this day. To continue, this extrapolates out to any time a pattern of expectations is set up, and then that pattern is violated in some unusual yet still sensible way. We recognize the break in the pattern and reward ourselves with humorous laughter. And then they go on to talk about the 3-man structure and how that, sets up a pattern. Blah, 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 blah. But number 3 is, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
And yeah, I think that's interesting. Who knows if it's true, but seems to resonate. And it's such a cornerstone of humor, is establish the pattern, then break it.
Yeah. No, that's a great theory. Like, it would explain why, I don't know, people find funny people charming or whatever, or like it's an attractive trait because it's like, oh, you're able to identify the pattern and extrapolate it out. That's useful in society.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Like pinpoint the things that are weird, pinpoint the things that aren't quite right.
Yeah, it's almost like an alarm bell system, I guess. Sorry, was that James?
I was just saying it shows observation, so that you're kind of able to recognize things and question them, or question whether or not they make sense and stuff.
Yeah.
That
kind of reminds me of the idea of like the jester or the court jester being the one that often would tell the king the truth.
Yeah.
But in a funny, like they're the one that's seeing what's going on and can talk about it.
Yeah. With impunity, because if the court jester makes fun of the king having erection problems in front of the court, the king can't really kill him because then everyone assumes the jester was telling the truth. So it's this weird, like, all right, you can get away with it. Okay. I did say at the beginning that I would read out the script that I made. I don't know that it's that funny. I think it's funny. But if it's not, I will cut this section out.
If it's what I'm thinking of, I thought it was fucking great. I laughed out loud in parts.
I don't think I've sent it to you. It's something I did for. Are you talking about the pool etiquette one, or?
Yeah, this is okay. No,
this is different.
Read up.
This is something I wrote for Nate, Ali's husband, because we're doing a little thing where doing a showreel thing where it's like I'll write some scripts and he'll record them for me.
Is the person going for the interview that you described earlier?
Yeah. This is the one.
Yeah,
exactly.
Cool.
So I'm just going to do it. The main guy has a Texan accent, so I'm going to do a terrible Texan accent. Just because.
Awesome. I'm here for this.
Alienate all our Texan listeners.
And you know what? I'm even going to screen share it just because. Okay. Interior, outside Principal Balmer's office. I don't know. Balmer's office. Morning. We open on Dean, seated in a hallway, man spreading on a chair, literally twiddling his thumbs. We get a shot of a door that says Principal. Sitting next to him is a young woman reading a magazine. 2 young girls walk by, chatting. He nods in a friendly but vacant manner as they pass. He looks at the woman. Dean, in a heavy American South accent. You work here? Woman, looking up from the newspaper. No, I'm a parent. My daughter goes to the school. Dean, she in trouble for shagging behind the shed or something? That's what you Aussies say, right? Shagging. The woman doesn't know whether to be offended or confused. Woman, excuse me? The door to the Principal Balmer's office opens, and Principal Balmer, late 30s, pretty and serious looking, is standing there. Principal Balmer to Dean. Mr. Jamison. Dean slaps his hands onto his thighs, looks at the woman. Don't worry, she'll be okay. Wish the same for me. He gives her a quick thumbs up, stands and follows Principal Balmer into the office. Interior, Principal Balmer's office, same time. Principal Balmer's office is tidy, neat, and quite small, what you'd expect of a principal's office in a mid-sized girls' high school. Principal Balmer waves Dean into a chair and he obliges with a beaming smile. It's clear that he's nervous. She sits across the desk from him, takes a sip of coffee, and meets his eyes with a slightly forced smile. Principal Balmer, I've looked over your resume. It's colourful. Dean, yep, 2 years in juvie, another 3 in Folsom Reformatory. Yes, if you're wondering, it is next to the prison. Her eyes widen in surprise and the smile tightens. Is that so? I mean, working there as a teacher, not an inmate. I'll tell you, some of those kids are a handful. This one kid in Folsom, he got a hold of a can of pepper spray, and Principal Balmer cuts him off. Well, come back to your experience. Have you been in Australia very long? Dean, fresh off the boat. Well, playing, pardon me, but trying to get to your country by boat is sounds about as much fun to me as it was for your ancestors. Principal Balmer, slightly apologetic. My ancestors are French. Got it, Dean. Got it. Stinky cheese for Secret Santa. He flashes a grin. Principal Balmer, a very small but genuine smile. All right, Mr. Jamison. And why do you think you're suited to this job in particular? It sounds as though you mainly have experience with boys. Is that about right? Dean. Well, I'm good with kids, including teens and, girls. I think it could be good. I think I could be a good influence on them, because some of them have daddy issues, right? And he stops himself and sees Principal Balmer's bristle. Dean. Oh, I didn't mean it like that. I mean, I would never, Principal Balmer, a little cold. Why don't you tell me your qualifications? Right, qualifications, yeah. Well, I graduated from Ole Miss in 2007. Principal Balmer, I'm sorry, who's Ole Miss? Dean. Oh, University of Alabama. Crimson Tide, Roll Tide. No, losing steam. Must be an American thing. Principal Balmer. Okay, so you graduated from the university in 2007, Dean. Yeah. So then I took a little time off, did some work in Cancun, Mexico. Principal Balmer. Brightening. Oh, you mean charity work? Helping young people in developing nations? That kind of thing? Dean, his eyes widen. Yeah, kinda. Cancun is a famous party destination.
Thank you.
Principal Balmer. Right, and then you returned to Texas, where you went to work in a reformatory school. I imagine that was quite a challenging environment. Dean, it weren't so bad. Those kids are just misunderstood. They definitely got up to some mischief, but we had an understanding. Except Leroy McCain, little motherfucker. Principal Balmer, the capsicum spray. Right, you guys call it capsicum. That's pepper. Yeah, that was a bit of an incident. I mean, I don't think anyone was permanently blinded. Principal Balmer, looking down at some paper. The principal of the school says here you have a gift for connecting with students. Dean, a little bashful. You just treat them like you want to be treated. Look, Miss Balmer, if I may be frank, the thing is, I just like kids. Like being a role model to them, someone they can look up to. I met a lot of kids who, well, they didn't have that at home, You can really make an impression on a child, good or bad. I just make sure it's the former. Principal Balmer, well, you certainly do make an impression, Dean. There is a moment of quiet, teacherly intimacy. Principal Balmer catches herself, becomes a little flustered, and shuffles her papers. Yes, well, I assume you have your working with children check and police checks taken care of? Working with Dean. Principal Balmer, children check? Dean. I have not done that just yet, but like I said, fresh off the boat, but I will get on to that ASAP. Principal Balmer. Okay, well, lovely to meet you, Dean. I will be in touch. She smiles warmly and holds out a hand across the desk. Dean reaches out a little too eagerly and knocks the coffee over. It goes all over her papers. Oh, shit, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Should I get a... No, okay, I'm going to go. Nice to meet you, though. I makes a phone gesture with his hand. Talk soon. He hurriedly makes his way out of the office.
Christ, I did that on a date once. I knocked the coffee all over the fucking girl's skirt. I still wake up screaming.
That's the yeah.
Yeah.
So that's sort of in the style of Ted Lasso. Obviously, hopefully it would work a little bit better with actual actors. But yeah, that's a little bit of comedy stuff I've been doing recently.
I like that, and it's got the whole, like laughing at someone's misfortune, but nothing's that is too bad or going to cause too much suffering.
Yeah, there's a cap, Yeah,
the embarrassment is there.
Yeah, it's got a nice heart to it as well. Like both characters seem like nice people.
Yeah, I feel like you kind of get a sense for who both of the people are. Like there's sort of archetypes, but like there's enough light and shade there to be a little interesting, at least. Anyway, cool. So that will do it, I think, for the episode. Did you guys have anything you wanted to add, or?
Hey, one more note on the final thing. I noticed that it's the setup of like there's the wild card and the straight man or straight woman in this case. There's the person who is funny and the person who's not reacting to the humor at all. And that is often a really common setup. Once again, Monty Python, I'm thinking of like the nudge, nudge, wink, wink sketch. You haven't seen it, look it up. But someone keeps making sexual innuendos and the other person doesn't understand and is getting really uncomfortable. And it's
funny.
I mean, that's so much of humor, right?
Yeah.
Straight man, wild card.
If you ever see one person just like stonewalling the other person when they're trying to make like, that's always
I don't know why that's funny, but it always is.
It's like Leno and Woodley, if you guys have seen that. Like
yes.
Woodley's a little bit like off the wall and like, oh, And then Leno's like, what are you doing? This is
Stop
stupid."
that. You're
Yeah.
an idiot and you're embarrassing yourself.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a funny dynamic, you know. The straight man and the wild card. Okay, cool. I have a comedy quote for us. So this is by Mel Brooks. Tragedy is when I cut my finger. Comedy is when you fall into an open sewer and die. and that's why Mel Brooks is a genius of comedy.
And it subverts the expectation.
It
I
does.
didn't expect that.
It does. Yeah. And that's like a single line. Like, you know, comedy is really effective because you can, if you're good at it, and he is or was, I think he's still alive. You can just make someone laugh with the smallest setup, which is pretty amazing. You know, like comedy's like magic. Making people laugh is like magic. I think it's real fun.
It is.
You just can totally change someone's mood with just like a little thing. Cool. And that'll pretty much do us for this episode, guys. So yeah, look, we are doing a mailbag episode really soon, and we would love to hear your responses. So look, just click in the little contact form that's just down below in your podcast of choice. You should be able to see it there. And just write into us. We'd really appreciate that. We'd love to get some questions from you if you guys. This is the audience, not you and Jane and Paddy. Yeah, that'll do it. That's all from us, and we'll see you next week, I think.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You're listening to Pros and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.